and more people joining us. All right, there's people joining us from South Africa, Gambia, but based in the Netherlands. I myself, I'm from Mexico and I'm currently in the United Kingdom. Um, it's great. Please keep the chat flowing. We love to know where you are currently based and where you're joining us from. Great. Well, as more people continue joining, I would like to first share the microphone with Margarita, who is the executive director of Southern Voice, so she can share some welcoming remarks and brief words on the work that we are doing. Once again, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Vale, and thank you everybody for joining us once again to the SV Talks. As you know, this is a platform that Southern Voice has created to bring together researchers, policymakers, practitioners from the Global South and the Global North in order to create an open dialogue and to have this exchange on the most pressing issues that we are facing across the globe.
Estás registrada, pero estás registrada
Sorry.
en Zoom.
No, bueno, no sé.
A ver.
Siempre tengo Zoom.
No, pero
Thank you, Ange. Thank you. Thank you. Today we're going to be talking about the participation of the youth. And this is a very important topic for us and for everybody should be, because as you know, the youth represent an important proportion of the population. And in the developing countries, we have even more and it's growing. So we need really to discuss how can we increase meaningful participation. That means not just being sitting at the table, but also have voices and be influential in the global agendas. So I want to thank the United Nations Foundations, our members and partners from the Policy Center of the New South, Fundación ARU, that today are going to be sharing with us their inputs on the research that they have done, on the work that they do day to day in order to really increase the participation of the next generation. And I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. And I hope that this is the start of a longer conversation and also a longer collaboration in order to put and to really move this topic in the global agenda. Thank you very much. And please enjoy, engage, and be part of this conversation. Thank you, Vale.
No, thank you, Margarita, and thanks everyone that is joining us in the chat and that has taken the time today in such a busy week to learn more about this research and this publication. I would also like to encourage that I think part of the purpose of this event is also to be amongst like-minded individuals. So please do take the opportunity here to engage with other people on the chat and maybe even exchange contacts by the end of the event. But well, I also want to take a moment to present myself. My name is Valeria Colunga. I am the Executive Strategy Officer at Southern Voice, and I also do research and work on intergenerational justice. So this topic today is very important to me. I will be moderating our discussion on catalysts for change, youth participation, and the future of global agendas. And I mean, it only takes one look at your phone or local newspaper to know that today's topic is not only important, but also timely. We have recently witnessed powerful demonstrations of Global South's young generations, from the Indonesian youth taking the streets demanding political reform, and also Gen Z-led protests in Nepal. These movements remind us that young generations are not only the leaders of the future, but they are rather the change makers of today, I'll dare to say. Young generations bring knowledge, fresh perspectives, and the ability to influence, which raises an important question that we will be exploring today. How do we move towards meaningful and impactful youth participation in policy discussions? Today, we'll hear from Adriana Tordoya Huanca, representing the team from ARU Fundación Bolivia, who will present youth engagement and participation in Bolivia based on their article. The other two authors who worked on this article, Miguel Vera and Mateo Villalpando, are also here in the room, and we want to thank them for joining us, and of course, congratulating them on their important work. We're also honored to have two expert commentators with us, Harshani Dharmadasa, Senior Director, Global Partnerships and Initiatives at the United Nations Foundation, and Hamza Saoudi, Senior Economist at the Policy Center for the New South in Morocco. Welcome, and thank you both for bringing your insights and expertise to this session. Let me briefly outline how we will proceed today so we know what's next. We'll begin with a 7-minute presentation of the paper by Adriana. And following that, Harshani and Hamza will respond to the presentation, sharing their perspectives on the field. We'll then move into a moderated discussion with Adriana, Harshani, and Hamza before we open up the Q&A session and conclude. And again, for this, I continue inviting you to use the chat box so we can start gathering your questions and we can use them later on for the session. So without further delay, let's move on to the next part of our conversation. Today, Adriana will be presenting the team's paper featured in our latest publication, Global South Perspectives, which we will share on the chat box. Adriana, you have 7 minutes. Please go ahead and tell us more about this research article.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Valeria. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be part of the Southern Results today and to be able to share with you the findings of our crucial study that we conduct together with my colleagues Miguel and Mateo from our foundation. This work is like on a topic of great urgency, the active participation of young people in public policy debates, especially in the context of the Global South. Youth participation is not only desirable, it's essential and urgent. The voice of youth is essential for several reasons. It's key to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, ensuring social equity, promoting peace, and safeguarding human rights. Furthermore, active youth participation not only improves the legitimacy and effectiveness of policies, but also enhances their creative and innovation in addressing the complex challenges of our society. In our specific context of the Global South, youth-driven perspective and solutions are vital to shaping a more equitable and effective development agenda. However, despite its recognized importance, there is still a knowledge gap regarding the mechanisms that truly promote meaningful youth participation, particularly in our region. Our study seeks to contribute to closing that gap. The main objective of our research was to analyze the effect of information framing on young people's participation in political debates, focuses on gender equality in the labor market. We implemented an experiment design with 3 groups of university students in Bolivia, defining meaningful participation as the percentage of young people who submitted an essay in an academic competition. The findings of this study are very revealing. First, we discovered that the way information is delivered can be as important as the content itself. Specifically, the use of infographics through digital media led to 6.8% increase in participation among UPA economics students. This suggests that accessible digital media is a powerful vehicle for fostering engagement. Second, the effectiveness of framing is not universal. It is strongly influenced by context factors. This includes institutional relationship, individual student characteristics as age, academic background, and their affinity for the subject. For example, we observe much greater interest in gender equality among political science and economics students than among computer science students. Third, we also found that despite interest, youth participation in the Global South faces numerous obstacles. Our study revealed that the information alone is not enough to alter beliefs. Furthermore, although young people contribute original approach and use solid evidence, they often struggle with the language and convention of formal policy writing. We also observe that participation tends to decline over time. This may be due to limit incentives or because the effort required does not translate into tangible results, suggesting a high opportunity cost mm, institutional mistrust and social work and academic obligation and other significant barriers. Our findings are most relevant to urban and universe contexts. This is one or limitation of our study, that which restricts generalization. The topic of gender equality itself may have influenced level of interest and participation. Despite this limitation, our work highlights potential strategies for fostering more inclusive and equitable societies in the global south. Our key recommendations are articulated at three levels of action. First, it's imperative to improve the dissemination of information, not only in terms of content, but also format. This involves using digital techniques, social media, and audiovisual media, ensuring that information is accessible and crucially appealing to young people. Second, we must invest in youth leadership and create appropriate incentives. This involves fostering critical thinking, communication skills, and civic culture. It is crucial to create appropriate incentives, whether academic, professional, or vocational, that truly respond to the needs of young people. It is also crucial to implement a robust follow-up strategy to sustain interest and demonstrate that their effort translates into concrete and tangible results. Third, it is essential to collect local data and adapt strategies. Governments, especially municipal governments, should take the lead in researching young people's motivation for sustained political engagement. I would like to conclude with a fundamental reflection. It's not enough to simply open up spaces for young people. We need to transform them into truly meaningful spaces. The experience in Bolivia shows that young people are willing to get involved, but they need the condition for participation to take into account their realities, timeframes, and motivations. To foster meaningful participation in the global south, it's imperative to adopt a multifaceted approach that addresses institutional barriers and harnesses young people's genuine interest in participation. This requires strengthening their capacities of national governments and fostering real collaboration between governments, NGOs, and youth participation to create a supportive environment in all policymaking process. If we truly listen to them, we will not only have more inclusive debates, but also more legitimate and effective public policies, and ultimately more just and resilient societies for the global south and the entire world. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana, for your presentation. I think it's really refreshing to see these insights presented in the way that you did. And I think the last few points that you mentioned, I think it's not only relevant, but I also see natural ways in which we can conduct this conversation with Harshani and Hamza. So I'm gonna invite them now with a few questions. But before that, I do want to encourage everyone to start sharing your thoughts and maybe any questions that you might have for Adriana regarding what she has presented. You can put them in the chat box and we'll use them later for the Q&A section. But now, I'm really excited to move forward with Hamza from PCNS. I'm going to start with you because I know that PCNS has the Emerging Leaders Program, which is one of the ways in which PCNS is working on investing in youth and young leadership, also in participating in policy dissemination and just like preparing young people, which I think it's really connected with what Adriana mentioned, which is not only about opening the space, it's also about giving the tools, giving the preparation, giving the background in order for these young people to be successful. Um, so Hamza, we would love to know your comments and your reactions to what Adriana has presented.
So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a great honor, great pleasure for me to be here with you. And thanks for Southern Voice for the invitation and for convening this important discussion on youth. And let me just bring some of the statistics as someone coming from Morocco, from the MENA region. Because when we talk about youth, so there are some facts that we should be recalling. So for the MENA region, let me recall that 2/3 of the total population are under 35. So when we talk about youth, we're not talking about something marginal. We're talking about substance. It is a question that is central for our societies. It's one of the, for me, the biggest developmental challenges that we have is to be able to develop our countries before getting older. So when we try to see the reality on ground, what we see is that youth unemployment rate is around 25%, which is one of the highest in the world. One striking reality is that youth unemployment tend to increase with the level of education, which is one of the striking realities. On top of that, we have 1/3 of the total population of youth that is NEET, not in education, not in training, not in the labor market, which means that a big share of the population of youth are today excluded from the labor market. So, and these are not just statistics, these are political facts. And for a large share of young people, survival income generation take precedence over policy engagements. So several of the youths don't see it as a right, but rather than something luxurious that only the elite can talk about. And that's, for me, I think, a very striking reality. And any serious about participation of youth, therefore, must be linked to strategies for decent work and rebuilding trust. And in the paper, also, I had the opportunity to look at it. One of the dimensions that hinder the participation of youth is the question of trust. And in general, and I fully agree on that with Adriana, is that in many countries in the global south, what we see is that young people face a dual exclusion. So economic and political exclusion. And this exclusion is self-reinforcing. So youth without labor market, without opportunities, are less likely to trust institutions, and youths without institutional trust are less likely to engage. So that's fundamental. If we want to have a meaningful engagement of youth, we need to include them in the labor market. So that's the basic. Now returning to the Adriana's presentation, and one of the key messages of finding is that digital framing or information delivery can increase the participation up by around 7% in percentage. So in several countries in the global south, more generally, or in the MENA region, more specifically, we see that media and social network as becoming central platform for youth mobilization. They lower the costs of access to information, enable new form of civic expansion, and can transform passive interest into collective action. So yet these tools alone are not enough for participation to be meaningful. So digital mobilization must connect to institutional processes that give youths real influence. The paper also focuses more on urban universities, but I think that this raises a fundamental issue, representativeness bias. In much of the global south, the majority of young people are not in universities, are not in education. Sometimes a big share of them are in rural areas, unemployed or in informal work. So these are precisely the group that are excluded from public debates, and these are the most impacted by policy outcomes. So when participation is limited to a narrow group, it easily turns to more consultation than influence. And the reality of youth, we should bring all the perspective. That is why even in the Policy Center for the New South, so we, as thinking about this issue of representativity, so we think that it's really important to go to talk about all of the youth, because when we go to international conferences, sometimes we see a category of elites that is well educated, but the other majority we do not know, and the realities of youth vary across income distribution, and the reality may differ a lot. And at the Policy Center for the New South, we launched several initiatives. For example, we have the platform that we have launched with the World Bank and UNDP concerning Parlons Développement, what we call Speak Development, where we go to rural areas, to universities in the suburb, and talk to young people to see different perspectives. So I think that's very important topic. We can go back, and I think there are several ways that we can empower youth. You've talked about the emerging leader programs, and this is part of what we call a develop part, is where we think about developing the skill and the leadership. And it is basically a program that gather around 40 young people from across the globe to discuss ideas, but also to interact with policymakers and to learn. But these are a small category, but we talk about that with the other initiative like Speak Development, where we go to the universities. So I think finally, I believe that participation became meaningful when youth are trusted, because we do not trust youth as much, and that's a big issue. We in the Policy Center, we are fortunate to have this trust in the youth. We are talking about in the Policy Center, the average age of the staff is nearly under 30. So all the there are several youths working at the Policy Center for the New South, and I'm joined the Policy Center as someone young, and I'm getting my bird some whiter. I'm getting older here. I'm not only I'm not no more a youth. So I think that we are fortunate to be part of an ecosystem that trusts youth, and I think that when we trust youth, they can deliver several things that are important. And for me,
Completely agree.
that's very important.
No, completely agree. And you know, it's so interesting just because I am familiar, and obviously Southern Voice is familiar with PCNS's work and with the UN Foundation's work. It's so clear how we're all collectively, all the people that we're trying to work on this, we're all collectively trying to achieve the same things in different ways, and through different aspects and pathways. So I'm gonna connect something that you said with Harshani, who is up next. Harshani from UN Foundation. And Harshani, I would love to hear your thoughts on Adriana's presentation, but also on connecting with what Hamza has already shared. And the reason why I say this is that I think Hamza's point on the dual inclusion is so relevant and important, and something that we acknowledge. And also this idea of having better representation in policy spaces, right? Because even when we already have global South youth in high level events, many times it's global South youth that do have the economic access to things, or do have the privilege to have a certain amount of education or type of education. And I know I'm very familiar because I did the program with the UNF's Next Generation Fellows, um, the Our Future Agenda work that you're leading at the UN Foundation. And also, more importantly, in my opinion, is just the efforts that you're putting into transforming these very difficult conversations into something that is inclusive and accessible for people. So, just wondering, what are your thoughts on all of this, and what is your point of view, having heard what Hamza and Adriana have said?
No, thank you so much for having me, Valeria, Margarita. Thank you so much, Southern Voice. I mean, I love this conversation, and I think we should be having more conversations just like this. I mean, the report is fantastic, and I think it spotlights, two or three major takeaways for me. Youth participation is incredibly, incredibly important. I think it's often overlooked as something that is nice to have, as almost something that could be, advertised but not really taken seriously. And a couple of things that really stood out to me is how young people receive information, but also how they communicate and connect. Young people are already shaping so much of their communities, as well as really setting how institutions deliver for the future. They're leveraging technology in ways that are so rapid, in ways that my generation, or Hamza's generation, as we are a little bit older, find hard to grasp. And a lot of the policy and research that's being put out there is in terms, in language that is just not relatable anymore. And we know that, if we take a look at the status of our world, which is, feels like it's getting a little bit more broken, it's not for the lack of financing, it's not for the lack of political will, it's not for the lack of the evidence of the science, it's this ability to kind of find consensus and find connectivity and build trust all the way from a local level to a national, to a regional, to a global level. And without that trust, it makes it incredibly, incredibly difficult to do even the most simplest of things, whether that's educating your children all the way up to resolving geopolitical conflicts. And that is not just a trust between communities, it's a trust between generations and finding that solidarity. And these policy pieces and these research products, they spotlight so many ways that we can come together. And I think a lot of that generational solidarity, that disconnect happens in the global south. It's largely because institutions, whether they're financial, whether they're political, whether they're universities, especially from the north, were built for the 20th century. They're not based on kind of equitable ways of communicating. So it's incredibly important to have Global South young voices in these conversations, but also producing this kind of research. So 100% very supportive of this product, and just really excited to kind of keep unpacking it. So well done.
Thank you. No, thank you. And Harshani, I'm not gonna let you go still because the first question for the discussion is one that I wanna actually um address to you. And just as a reminder, I'm seeing we have a couple of people already using the chat box. So please keep that going on because we'll get back to these questions for our Q&A. Um, but well, Harshani, I mean, the study of Bolivia shows that youth face multiple barriers to participating in policy discussions, from balancing work and study to institutional distrust, migration, and many more that you already have mentioned as well. But I imagine that some youth are facing even higher barriers. From your experience working so closely with young people, what persistent barriers do you perceive prevent inclusive and diverse youth participation? That includes, for example, youth from indigenous and marginalized communities or youth living in rural areas. And what do you think are specific collaborative actions that we could take together to overcome them? Going back into this thinking that we're all collectively trying to move towards something that hopefully will impact more people.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and one that we think about quite a lot at UN Foundation, not just for the moment that we're in now, but also the next 20 to 50 years. I think, in terms of access, that's a huge problem, especially for young people from the Global South or marginalized communities, whether that's visa barriers, funding gaps, language, digital divides, that really prevent young people from accessing processes and rooms where decisions are made, especially those limitations just multiply as you kind of go from local to national to regional to global. I think the other, area of limitation is really how our institutions really think. Our institutions tend to think in political cycles. So very short term and very limited by the funding that we have. And young people don't really think that way. They think about the future. It is what really drives this generation. And it doesn't really happen with one event or one consultation. It really requires sustained engagement, and that requires long-term investment in leadership, whether that's fellowships or mentorship or research, but also within governance structures themselves so that they are intergenerational. So you're not just having like meaningful youth engagement in its own bubble, but actually embedding young people within governance systems overall, so that the thinking of policy is not just in the short term or in the sporadic, but it's in the long term. And I think another fundamental piece is kind of that power shifting, power sharing that has to happen. Often young people, even when they're consulted, it's rarely, about decision-making authority. So it's really trying to find those co-creation mechanisms, as I said, this intergenerational governance that really helps young people shape their outcomes, policy outcomes now and for the future. And so a lot of, I know, Southern Voice thinking about post-2030 is very, very vital here. I can go into kind of suggestions on what that could look like, but I hope some of the examples I gave helps. Happy to keep unpacking that, Valeria.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. And once again, I love your question, your answer. And I had never thought about the political cycle piece, and I feel like it just unlocked a whole like conversation that I think we should be having on these different ways in which we're thinking about engaging with the political system, which I know someone in the chat was already kind of like asking a question regarding political systems. But for now, I'm gonna move back to Hamza and Adriana. Um, so both of you um, are researchers based in the global south, and you have probably participated in youth forums and discussions. And I'm just really interested in understanding what gaps do you perceive still exist, and what are the necessary improvements that you believe we need to take to ensure that youth don't only have a voice but actually an ability to influence decision making. And I think that probably in your experience as researchers, um, politically active people as well, I imagine you have a lot that you probably want to unpack. Really, really interested in hearing from both of you.
Well, thank you for the question, Valeria. I believe this is precisely the heart of the debate. How do we go from having a voice to being able to genuinely make an impact? Look, as a young researcher at our foundation, an organization whose name precisely means voice in an indigenous language, I can tell you that the real challenge isn't just about participation. The challenge is ensuring that this voice or voice translates into real influence on public policy. In my experience and from what we've seen in the research, the barriers and solutions can be seen in two main areas. The underlying problem is that the young participation often gets stuck. It remains in the debate or conversation phase, and we can seem to move fast to generate rigorous proposals that truly analyze and change the structures. The main gaps we see are in the quality and the real impact of our contributions. First, there is the institutions gap. In the global south, let's be honest, most young people do not trust that institutions will actually use our input to make decisions. This creates a huge disillusionment, a mistrust that doesn't help build a cohesive society. If at the end of the day you feel your effort leads to nothing, participation becomes something merely symbolic, right? This discourages participation and can lead to political apathy among young people. And second, I think there is the gap in scientific rigor. This is key. Look, young people have innovation ideas, creative ideas, but the influence gets lost if our proposal lack the scientific rigor and methodology that policymakers need to be able to implement them. It's like we're speaking a different language. We struggle to translate our knowledge into the formal language of public policy. We have a youth voice, yes, but we lack the high quality evidence to be taken seriously where decisions are made. So, how do we move from voice to real influence? I believe that for young people to truly be able to have influence, the focus has to change. We have to shift from being mere participants to be producers of rigorous and independent knowledge. So, what do we need? First, I sustain investment in scientific rigor. I believe the ability to influence goes hand in hand with presenting high quality scientific evidence. For that, specialist training is vital. Things like courses, mentorships, as mentioned, and internship in technical areas like statistical analysis or quantitative methodologies. For example, at our foundation, we create several initiatives like the Serious Facts and Figures, which I am part of, that aim for exactly that, for young people to generate useful and precise knowledge. We need to foster critical analysis, but one that is constructive, let's say, or reliable, and objective data. Second, we need to create a strategic space for exchange because it's not enough just to generate the knowledge. We have to make sure it gets to the place where decisions are made. We must build bridges, initiatives that connect research with policy. Forums like the one we're now, the Sotheby's Talks, are a great example because they bring together researchers, specialists, and policymakers so that this knowledge exchange actually happens. And finally, I believe follow-up mechanisms and contextualization are crucial because influence can only be sustained if we can demonstrate that it is an impact. Institutions must create follow-up mechanisms that show transparently that the efforts of young people translate into concrete and tangible results. This is along with good incentives, whether academic or professional. Is what will rebuild the tools we need for participation to be truly meaningful. In a sense, I believe that for young people in the global south to have a capacity for real influence, we have to make a transition. We must go from being simple awards to become producers of rigorous evidence, an evidence that is capable of transforming public policy and with it building a much more inclusive society for everyone.
Great. And I love that last piece. That piece of um not only being producers of knowledge, but also being taken seriously as like the voices of that knowledge, right? Like being able to do it from the beginning till the very end, producing the knowledge and then disseminating that knowledge as well, and being taken seriously every step of the way. Hamza, super interested on your thoughts, and I know maybe we can also get some of the richness of the regional diversity, right? Because Adriana is connecting all the way from Latin America, and you're in the MENA region. Tell us more about your thoughts.
So thank you very much. I think just to maybe from my humble experience, and I think that I was fortunate to participate in several international gatherings, and I have seen several progress in giving spaces for youth to discuss with policymakers and to bring their voices. But I think one of the major issue or the major challenge that's still adding to the challenges presented by Adriana is the representativity gap. So youth participation remain dominated by a small group of urban elites, educated people, and the majority of young people from the global south, those in informal settings, those that are unemployed, those that are in need, not in school, not in education, not in training, they are excluded from the discussion. And the reality is, and I've been fortunate also to discuss with different categories of the population, and even during our experiences speaking to needs, speaking for with several categories of the population, the realities are very different. The realities and the issues facing the elites is completely another story with those facing at the bottom income distribution of the population. So that's, I think, the representativity is a very big issue, and that is why we think about that even at the Policy Center for the New South. And speaking to you right now, next week we are organizing a discussion with the NEETs, with a group of NEETs and senior officials at the government, and the objective is trying to listen to them and to discuss with them and to see, and maybe we'll see different perspective that sometimes when we are from a bottom from top down approach, we do not understand what are their realities. So let's be humble, and I think that's a very good point, is to be humble and talk to people facing these challenges. So I think that one key, and we've learned a lot from our initiative Speak Development, moving to universities in rural areas. The realities are very, very different. And I think that's, so to move forward, I think beyond that, so the first thing is institutional embedding. So we don't need only a seat in forums, but in local council, national dialogues, and also in politics, international platforms where decisions are made. So we have a tendency always to talk about empowering youth. Empowering youth is good, but giving them power is even better. And the youth, they need to have a role model. And that's what's still missing. It's sometimes, I think that's the danger, the biggest threat for me is is to kill the hope of youth, because the youth are the big share of the population. The youth are, and you've talked about that, There are facts. They are our present and our future. So, and we should invest on them. Adriana talked also, and I agree with that, with her on the capacity building and evidence-based inputs. So participation became substantial when young people are equipped with productive knowledge, data analysis, fact-based analysis. So without tackling both gap, representation and impact, the issue participation will remain weak or maybe symbolic.
Agreed. No, agreed. And honestly, I wasn't quick enough, but I was gonna add like a clapping emoji to that. So great, great insights. Um, Fernando Wonderly, I see you have your hand raised, and I would like to kick off our Q&A session with you. Of course, you can make a question to anyone in the panel, and everyone in the panel is encouraged to either give their own opinion or just start a natural conversation between each other, reacting to what we have heard already. And yeah, Fernanda, you are the director of the Socioeconomic Research Institute of the Bolivian Catholic University, which is a member of Southern Voice. So it's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Valeria. I would like to congratulate the meeting. The subject, it's so important, this subject, to this platform, but also to each of us, no? And I would like just to complement what Adriana has just shared with us, that in Bolivia, from the Institute, we are trying to tackle the problem of exclusion, how to include the youth from rural areas, from community, from trying to move on, surpassing the problem of top down and trying to very humbly, it is something that we are just beginning. But what we are doing and trying to do is to have research, as we call it, the interdisciplinary and community-based research. So we have many projects going on here in Bolivia with our institute, but in a network with other institutes, that the idea, the process is, we begin with the communities, mainly in rural areas and also in the urban areas, but the excluded parts, promoting or empowering the youth network, youth collectivities. And with them, we develop from the beginning of the research process, defining the problem with them, and going through a process of developing the research with them and finishing. So the idea is not transmitting to them, and not only involving within the institute that we have it, with the elite, the youth elite, because this is what we do. We are working with researchers, young researchers, that is from elite groups. But this is something that we are now systematizing, the methodology that we are using, with very interesting results. So we have research with communities from all over the territory in Bolivia. And there are many challenges to do that, because as Hamza was saying, people are not prepared to. They have serious educational gaps also, but it is possible. And we are doing that with adolescents and youth, people that are finished school, and with very interesting results. Some of the themes that we are working is sexual and reproductive rights, violence prevention, care, the care organization, but also environmental issues, because many of the communities, the main problems they are facing is environmental issues. It's just water justice, many other problems of contamination and other things. So this, just to finish, there is this methodology that we are refining, learning in the process with the youth, organized collectivities, how to do research interdisciplinary in a dialogue of saberes, no? Conocimientos, no? Knowledge, and also in a community-based way of doing that. So it involves not only the youth, but the youth organized, but also all the other actors. So that would be, I would like to complement that in the sense to give to this meeting another experience from Bolivia. Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's so valuable to hear these insights from someone that works on this at the highest level of the think tank, right? So thank you again for sharing this. I do want to acknowledge we have two raised hands. After Nusa, who raised her hand, I will be moving to a couple of chat box questions, and then we will move to Tamsir. So Nusa, thank you for joining us. Nusa works with PCNS along with Hamza, and she's part of our steering committee. So it is great to have you here, Nusa.
Thank you very much. Really very pleased to be here to hear the very important and informative presentation by our speakers. I just wanted to say a few words about the political participation, and just to remind, share with you that in Morocco we've been reserving a quota for the young people, for the youth in the parliament, as well as for women. I believe that this mechanism is very important because I was one among, or maybe I was the person who introduced the quota for women in the parliament. But for me, for us, for the political elite, we were considering that this mechanism is a transitional, just to make awareness within the society to show that women, young people are able to bring added value. Now, I believe in my society, we never made an evaluation to see how this mechanism have been positive or not. But I can see the same for the whole politics, how our democracy is working. And I believe this is a great question. Maybe young people are no more attracted by politics because it's not attracting at all. But at the same time, we have no other choice. And here I believe that young people have a power and they should not give up their power. It's through the voting, the operation, to participation in the elections, to express and to bring their voices. This is, for me, the most important thing to do. And the last thing, maybe we should also, decision makers should maybe consider a new forms of participation. We see young people how important their presence on civil society platforms, social media. They have, and they are, present in a big proportion of the society, but their voices are not taken in account during political systems. So I believe we should reconsider the mean how they are, how they can contribute, and finally to create really a space for intergenerational dialogue, because we need both young and the eldest to dialogue and to bring both of them their value to our societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Nusa. And I think I love that you use the word intergenerational dialogue, right? Sometimes I talk about it and people are like, inter what? And I'm like, intergenerational, like between generations. Let's do this together and work together towards this. So we are running very with limited amount of time. I do want to, however, address a question from the chat, so at least we get some of that, and then go to Tamsir. But for this, I will ask for remarks to be really brief, so we can also get last round of takeaways from the speakers. I'm gonna read a question from the chat that is addressed to Harshani. So Julia Batacharji is asking, what are the biggest barriers young people face when trying to influence policy, and how can institutions help remove them? And I think here the magic or the most important part is the last part, no? Like how can institutions help removing these barriers? Harshani, what are your thoughts?
No, it's a great question, Julia. Thank you for asking it. I mean, there are some simple things that could be done. I mean, making sure, there are young people who can actually get into the room, that are part of these conversations, whether that's physically or virtually or through surveys. There are so many mechanisms to engage young people, so access is incredibly important. I think agency, it's not just access, but actually giving young people real influence in decision making, not just visibility. So that could be capacity building to support young people, mentoring, training, just showing up alone. It takes a lot just to be in that room, but it takes a lot more to be able to feel that you have real agency and say. I think accountability is another feature, ensuring that youth inputs are tracked, that their ideas and priorities actually reflected in policy outcomes, whether that's in research and policy decisions or even in governance. So there's at least some follow-up from what was said and shared. And ensuring that there's continuity, creating structures that really go beyond just the meetings, the summits, the moments, really ensuring that there's opportunities for youth leadership, transitions, between processes and feedback loops. And I think sometimes it's even just asking, okay, within these institutions, which were, designed or developed decades ago, what are young people doing now? They're outside formal institutions that still have a huge influence in political decisions and public mindsets. I mean, we see young people mobilize on Discord, to WhatsApp groups, to on the streets. There are so many innovative ways, crowdsourcing. So it's also institutions being more agile and actually meeting young people where they already are. This goes to Adriana's point on even just the research. It doesn't sound like young people. They're not going to read this. They don't talk this way. They don't think this way. And that's the same for institutions. They need to think, talk, feel, act like young people in order for young people to feel that they can relate to those institutions, trust in them. So they're actually thinking outside of the box.
Thank you, Harshani. This is super helpful, really insightful. Just for the sake of time, we're going to do a last question, and this is going to be from Tamsir, who has raised his hand. Tamsir, I see from your photo that you are a Jungo GTC member, I believe. Tell us about your question, and we're happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I am Tamsir Salam from the Gambia, but residing in the Netherlands. I'm part of Yongo as part of the global coordination team. Yongo is the official youth and children constituency under the UNFCCC. So my question is possibly more about how can youth from the global south influence climate policies, especially like in the global climate policies, which is dominated by the northern countries, because we realize that most young people from the global south don't have really real voice in the climate negotiation, because I've been actively following or engaging in climate negotiations leading to the UN climate conferences. Mostly I attend the subsidiary body meetings. So, but you tend to realize where these policies or agendas are drafted you have very few limited young people's participation, whereas especially those from the global south, due to visa restriction and whatever, their voice are limited and they actually give in the disadvantaged position. So mostly the opportunity they have is to attend the global conference that is COP, whereas it's more of political, where most decisions are made, but where the initial agenda is drafted, like the pre-COP meeting, like the subsidiary body meeting, young people from the global south are, impacted with participation. So how can we design a way whereas young people's voice from the global south can be influential in some of these global climate discussions?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tamsir. We have 5 minutes left. So Hamza and Adriana, if you could share your thoughts maybe in 60 seconds, let us know your reaction to this
I
question.
think I think that if you want to participate as youth in any topic that you want, whether climate, whether AI, whether all the challenges that the big trend that we are facing, maybe it's through research and evidence-based research. So you need to be serious about it. So writing evidence-based research on that topic and trying to go to international settings, presenting your paper could be a way that to have an influence and maybe to bring voices from the new south and from the global south to international settings. So that could be a way, practical.
Thank you. Adriana?
Yes, thank you. Yes, as young researchers, we have to try to invest in our technical skills and try to have more capacity to have a good role for have a good evidence. No, I think it's because we need to have been aware to become producers of rigorous evidence that capacities for transforming public policy and building more inclusive society. But I think it's a really challenge for young people.
Thank you. Great. We have 3 minutes left. So my last request for our dear speakers is maybe in 2 or 3 words, what are your final thoughts or feelings from this conversation? I think that's something that we can briefly share. And I'm gonna start with Harshani, then Hamza and Adriana. Just like a last thought, maybe in a sentence.
I think my last thought is thinking about post 2030. I think it's a real opportunity to bring in research and dialogue and young people's perspectives all the way up from a local level, because the UN and everything else between it is a local bottom-up process that should have global south front and center and young people front and center. So there's a lot here that I learned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harshani. Hamza.
And I think one of the dimension, and we've all talked about one word, which is trust. And rebuilding trust is a key fundamental. And that's
Mhm.
is not something that is easy. It's a developmental issue as well. Because if you want to build trust between youth and the institutions, political institutions, etc., so there is a responsibility from government to put in place some action that translate into the increasing of living standards of the youth and the population. So if you start by actions in education system and the youth started to feel the transition and the evolution, not maybe today, but to have some positive sign, they trust the system and they can engage. So I think that we need to first to trigger also interests of youth, develop and deliver. So we need to turn engagement into knowledge and skills into real impact.
Exactly. Adriana.
Yes, thank you. My call to action is simple and direct. The institution, I ask you to invest in us. Give us this space for this participation and the tools to generate high quality evidence, as mentioned, Hassan. And to young researcher, I said, let's take on the challenge the last question. Let's be producers of rigorous knowledge that cannot be ignored. I think it's difficult, but let's make sure our voice is not only heard, but transformed through evidence into transform public policy.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adriana. And thank you to everyone who has attended this event, to all the participants, because without you, this discussion wouldn't be possible. We're really grateful to our partners for their support, for making this event possible. And I'm not going to repeat what they said because I think they said it best. And I think it's pretty clear that the most important aspect and the main key takeaway here is thinking about that double inclusion that is needed, right? It's not only about thinking about the global south, it's also about thinking of the young voices that should be represented as part of the global south. So thank you, everyone. I'm happy to share that the next session of SB Talks will take place in early December on the topic of reimagining security. And please, if you want to attend, stay in touch and look at our socials. And until then, we'll see you. We'll see you then. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. It's been a pleasure.